With Patrick still
Welcome everyone to the October 17th Board of Supervisors meeting, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, and we will start with some announcements. First, we would like to thank all the residents who came out for Community Day on October 8th. The board would also like to thank all of the staff, especially those who volunteered their time to make the event such a success. And finally, the board would like to thank all the sponsors who also helped to make Community Day possible. The public hearing for H.R. 458 to consider amending Chapter 163 of the Tredyffrin Township Code, Sewers, Utilities, and Sewage Disposal has been rescheduled to Tuesday, November 1st, 2022. Please note that the first Board of Supervisors meeting in November is scheduled for Tuesday, November 1st, prior to the normal meeting day due to the elections. There remain open positions on the Park and Recreation Board, Historical Commission, Libraries Foundation Board, and Municipal Authority. Send your letter of interest and brief resume to tredyffrin@tredyffrin.org. In addition to receiving the Township's printed newsletter, you can also get current updates by registering to receive the Township's monthly e-newsletter at www.readychesco.org. You can also follow the Township on social media, TTTV, and In the Spotlight on the website. We move to the approval of minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the September 19th, 2022 public meeting?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to approve minutes of the October 5th, 2022 public meeting.
So moved.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And we move to the Township business. The board met in executive session prior to this meeting to discuss legal and personnel matters. And now we have supervisor liaison reports. Supervisor Miller.
Thank you very much. The Planning Commission meets this Thursday at 7 p.m. We have not met since our last meeting, but I would like to offer a motion, and I'll do it for both at the same time, to reappoint Scott Growney and Pete Jonick to the Planning Commission. They've both been long-term members and have served done a great job as far as I can tell.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do you have anything else?
No, they haven't met since last meeting.
Okay.
This Thursday, 7 o'clock.
All right. Supervisor Humble.
Thank you. Tredyffrin Township Parks and Recreation Board meeting met on October 12th. New business considered had to do with an Eagle Scout project in one of the parks brought forth by Warren Schrader. We also had a request to intern by Sydney Singh. Those of you who follow what Parks and Rec does may remember Sydney. She is the person who in her senior year of high school documented all the trees in Wilson Farm Park to where you can go to each tree and scan it and find out what type of tree it is and anything else you want to know about it. So she would be a welcome addition to helping out Parks and Rec. As well as entertain the addition of a new storage box at the Ambrosia Park brought by Tushar Vendante. We also had a person interested in volunteering as a new member of the Parks and Rec Board, Portia Trisdorfer, attended the meeting as well. So anything else about that is it was just the usual stuff where we considered the old business as well as receiving subcommittee updates regarding the 2022 annual report and options for a dog park in Tredyffrin. Additionally, I did attend on September 22nd the zoning board meeting in place of Murph Wazaki so that he could attend the Berwyn Fire Company Ball. I don't have that written up yet, so I'd ask to be able to pass that to the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Holt.
Good evening. The Paoli Task Force met on October 5th with representatives from Amtrak, SEPTA, PennDOT, the Township, and other stakeholders for review of the progress thus far on, I think it's phase 2 of the Paoli Transportation Center and Highway Improvements Project. Progress is being made. The bridge plans for North Valley Road and the new Central Ave traffic circle have essentially been approved by the interested entities. Most, if not all, plans and permits have been secured. Amtrak needs to complete right-of-way acquisitions along with easements between it and PennDOT. Also, they need to complete the construction agreement. The ball, from my view of things, looks to be essentially in Amtrak's court under a number of issues, and the township is working through channels to get them to move quicker. The timeline, as it stands right now, is for demolition of the acquired properties sometime in spring, summer of 2023, and bidding to go out April 2024 and construction to start later 2024, probably in the summer, with completion maybe around fall 2025. Truth be told, I was a little disappointed to hear of the timeline. This project has been in the works for quite some time, and it's needed, and I've asked and others have asked the township to do all they can to move things along so we don't have an eyesore and unimproved conditions for almost 3 years. Nonetheless, the reinstitution of the task force meetings, I think, is a big positive. There's another one scheduled in 4 months, and we're going to continue to do all that we can to make sure that project moves forward quickly. Thank you. Oh, and on the municipal authority, I would like to move to reappoint Mike Kissinger, who is a loyal and active member of the authority and adds a lot. So,
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right, Supervisor Wysocki.
Aye.
Need to turn your mic on. Sorry, need to turn your mic on, sorry.
I thought I didn't need it. There is another zoning hearing board meeting on October 27. That's Thursday a week. And that's that. I don't have a report. Supervisor Humble will be giving a report on the meeting that she kindly attended for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Freed.
Thank you. The Historical Commission will be meeting this Thursday night, October 19th at 7 p.m. right here at the Township Building.
Thank you. Supervisor Basker.
Thank you, Dr. Gussie. So I'm going to start out by thanking Dr. Gussie and thanking former Supervisor Wysocki for appointing me to be the liaison to the various groups that I'm a liaison to, because none of the meetings are boring. There's not a boring minute at any of those meetings, so I try to sort of condense the interesting stuff. If you're really interested in any of the meetings, please come to the meetings or please check out the minutes because there's a lot of detail and I don't want to be talking here all night. So I'm going to just sort of summarize what I think are the points of interest. So the Traffic Committee met on September 21st, and this is the meeting that gets the most public participation, not surprisingly. So as it turns out, a quick summary: a crosswalk on Old Eagle School Road and Homestead Road, PennDOT doesn't agree with that. There was a discussion of speed humps and a crosswalk on Bradford Road, and they were because of concerns about cars speeding. And so the police department is going to try and get some speed data. There was an issue with South Valley Road and Circular Avenue concerns, even with the signs. It's a very accident-prone location. And there's an ongoing discussion with PennDOT about the safety of that intersection. There was a discussion about Chester Valley Trail access at North Valley Road and also bicycle safety on North Valley Road. And the issue is really anyone coming down from Paoli wanting to turn left on North Valley Road, from North Valley Road onto the Chester Valley Trail. That's a rather dangerous intersection from the point of view of cars going around bicycles. They need to brake. They're coming downhill, so they need both hands to brake and they need to turn left. So it's not a great situation if you're a cyclist, but because of the topography and the road, and there's not much we could do. So that is basically the conclusion we came to. There was also issues with concerns about speeding concerns on Conestoga Road near the schools. And again, the cameras don't operate at the school zone time. They operate outside of school zone times, and right now they don't appear to have a lot of speeding data. There was also discussion about at 66 Devon Park Drive, the fact that the parking lot is across the business and employees constantly have to cross a busy road to get to between the parking lot and their offices. And again, they were willing to fund a crosswalk, and there's ongoing discussions on that. And there's also discussions about a school bus stop on West Central Avenue, and because I guess sometimes with the turnover in school bus drivers, they don't necessarily know that they have to stop and they then have to go turn around. So there was we'll continue to monitor the situation. There's no real resolution that we can do at that point. Now, some good news is that on Pugh Road with the culvert, PECO has finally finished all of their work, and which means that the township contractor has ordered the supplies, and construction is expected to start in November, and fingers crossed be done by sometime in the spring. So anyway, so that was the traffic committee. Then the next meeting, by the way, is December 31st at 7:30 a.m. The Library Board of Trustees met on Thursday, September 22nd. So the Library Foundation still has 3 openings on the board. So as Supervisor Gussie, as Chair Gussie said, please apply for those if you're interested. In terms of building access, it's up over 2021, but still, only half of pre-pandemic levels. However, circulation is up significantly over 2021, and it's probably around 2/3 to 3/4 of pre-pandemic levels. And e-circulation continues to increase, and at this point, it's about 28% of total circulation, so that's good. We've also been expanding the library hours, so the Stafford Library is now open 1 to 5 p.m. starting October 16th. And Paoli operating hours have increased, and the directors are hoping to start opening the Stafford Library at 9:30 a.m. starting today. And Paoli, interestingly, the print and AV material circulation has increased even faster than the Stafford Library, and is now at about 85% of pre-pandemic levels, especially the children's materials, which are up around 96%. So the Board of Trustees voted to request from the Library Foundation funds for the purchase and installation of water bottle filling stations, new tables for the computer lab, and also to power wash the building. And the Friends of Tredyffrin Public Library had 2 weekends scheduled for book donations, and they're continuing to look at space issues because the library really is cramped for space, and they take book donations. Friends of TPL takes book donations and resells them to make funds for the library. Also, we had Joe Sherwood, who is the executive director of the Chester County Library System there, and he discussed the funding formula, which is based on some composite of material acquisitions and library usage, and the state has an increase in library funding coming. And interestingly, at this point, CCLS is on track for 1 million e-checkouts this year, which is about 25% of checkouts. And Johanna Paciolo is working on a draft collections policy and asked for comments to be sent to her. There was also a discussion about the Golf Classic to benefit the Library Foundation. The next meeting is October 27th at 7:30 p.m. And at this point, I would also like to make a motion to reappoint Nancy Talley and Jennifer Whip and Johanna Paciolo. So Nancy Talley and Jennifer Whip are being reappointed as members from Tredyffrin, and Johanna is being nominated as the Willistown representative to the Library Board of Trustees. So I'd like to make a motion at this time.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, so moving on to the Environmental Advisory Council. So that met on Tuesday, September 27th, and there was discussion. So Conestoga High School has this big expansion project with fields coming up where there was a former nursery, and the plans are for 3 fields. 2 of them apparently are for artificial turf, and 1 of them is for natural turf. So there was discussion about the pros and cons of artificial turf, and the conclusion was that the EAC really needs to gather more information before they can have an opinion, and Doug Arnestad is acting as the repository for questions and concerns. And then we had the second, hopefully annual Roots Festival yesterday at Stratford Park. Now, this is kind of a Roots and Shoots Festival. It's very different from the Philadelphia Roots Festival, but it's a cool name if you're into plants. And it was a lot of fun with educational activities for the kids, some huge bubbles, live music, and tables from various multiple organizations. And there was also a presentation of the rain garden. Now, talking about the rain garden program, the final 2022 rain garden program was installed Sunday, September 25th at Contention Lane near the corner of Old State Road. And for public reference, Amber Levy and Ann Murphy will put up a list of rain garden friendly plants and shrubs, so that if you'd like to do your rain garden or your own native plants and shrubs, that's a resource. And then on the weekend of October 1st and 2nd, members and affiliates of the EAC and family members and a member of the Trout Creek Residents Association helped with the Glen Hardy Valley Garden Club tree giveaway. So the garden, in return for that, the Garden Club gave the EAC a black gum tree, which is planted as a replacement in tea garden for one tree that had to be removed. And there was also a discussion about a study planning, very early stages, to be carried out in May 2023 on Krabby Creek water assessment and macroinvertebrate studies. There was also 2 bird walks. The one on September 24th identified 13 species of birds. If you're interested in birds, the next bird survey is Sunday, September 23rd at 8 to 10 a.m. The next meeting of the EAC is October 25th, next Thursday at 7 p.m. And I'm also the liaison to the Paoli Task Force, but I guess since Supervisor Holt already gave you a very detailed report on the task force, I'll spare you the details of the report, but I do want to have some slides to show you. So if we could have the slides up, please. So the current bridge on North Valley Road in Paoli, it's not just an eyesore, it's dangerous. So I remember even before I moved here in 1998, I used to visit a customer up in Great Valley. And every time going from the airport to Great Valley, I always thought that the bridge was kind of a danger going over there because of limited visibility. If it were icy and someone were, slipping on the other side. Well, this is from the engineering associates, this is the design for the future bridge. Based on what Supervisor Holt said, I really hope that I get to see it in my lifetime, but, I'm not holding my breath. The expectation is that construction will start in 2024. But this is what it looks like, and basically Derby Road will cross the tracks, join up with North Valley Road, and there'll also be an access to the parking lot going under the bridge, as you can see. This is a view from looking from over the road coming down from Paoli, looking at the intersection of North Valley Roads and Central Avenue. And the plan is to put a roundabout in the middle with some greenery on it. And I like the idea of a roundabout there over traffic lights, because roundabouts are a really good way, in my opinion, to manage traffic. And that little corner out there on the northwest corner, it's actually a stormwater retention facility, but it's going to be made with a little walking area and a place to sit down and, contemplate the greenery that we have, a little green space in the middle of Paoli, so that's also going to be nice. So again, this is the concept. I hope it comes to pass this time instead of, slipping 1 week, 1 year for every year that goes by. So if it slips 3 weeks for every year that goes by, eventually it will happen. But anyway, so that's all I have. So thank you very much for showing the slides. That was the last one. And that concludes my report. So over to you, Chair Gussie.
Thank you. All right, we will continue down the agenda. And we next have a motion to retroactively approve a PCCD grant application to achieve accreditation under the Pennsylvania Chiefs PLEAC program. Lieutenant Moyer.
Members of the board, the police department's requesting your approval to retroactively apply for this grant. It is a 2-year grant that Governor Wolf and Attorney General Shapiro came out with. We would use it for 2 separate reasons, one being our accreditation efforts and the other being for retention and recruitment. The total of the grant would be about $76,000, just under $77,000.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
Second.
Second.
Okay, any board discussion? All right, any public comment? Okay, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to approve proposal from General Recreation, Inc. for a comfort station at LAD Park. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Tonight, this is a motion to authorize the township to engage a contract with General Recreation, Inc. for a comfort station. As you may recall, this originally was being proposed at Tea Garden Park. Unfortunately, PICO and the federal government regulations would not allow that structure to be placed there. So working with the Parks Board and other stakeholders, we are recommending it be put at LAD Park. I know it's a very well-used park, and I think it'll be a great addition. The amount is for $78,665, of which this is bid through CoStar's program, and we will be using the ARPA funding to cover the cost. Happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board comment?
I just have one quick question. So I understand that the ARPA money is there to pay for the bathroom. How much does it cost us per year to maintain these? Like I see, Darren, like what does it cost? I understand it's each incremental thing is a little bit, but what do you think it costs?
Probably for the restrooms, probably an hour a day.
An hour a day for the whole year?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. What does an hour cost? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I'd have to ask Joe.
All right, I'm just curious.
Yeah, we'd have to run that. So right now there's porta potties that are existing at that location. Yeah. So. Yeah, there's going to be additional cleaning. It's going to be a facility, probably be well used, right? So, yeah. Yeah. Maintain, correct, yeah. But we're in that park cleaning anyway, and we don't, obviously don't, the porta potties we use a contract with, but where they're maintaining it, there'll be someone going through there, so it'll just be an additional step in their duties, probably an additional hour, as opposed to whatever X amount of time they do in that park. So, yeah.
I'm not supportive. I would just love to know what the math is at some point. If you don't mind getting back to me, that'd be super helpful.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep, no problem.
Any other board comment or questions? Any comments from the public? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to authorize staff to advertise and receive bids for cured-in-place pipe project. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, we're requesting authorization to go to bid for this project at the recommendation of our sewer engineer, Brown and Caldwell. We're looking at about 12 pipe runs to be addressed. That's approximately 3,100 linear feet. This is a rehabilitation project and an industry standard for local gravity sewer lines, and it's been done in the past in the township. So we're seeking your authorization to move forward with this project. Darren and I will be happy to answer any specific questions you have.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board comment? Any public comment? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to authorize settlement agreement with Richard and Catherine Parker for the use of 605 Knox Avenue. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is giving authorization for us to enter into settlement for a litigation matter involving the property at 605 Knox Avenue.
All right, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board comment? Any public comment? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to authorize Township Manager to execute documents related to a personnel matter regarding Michelle Major. Mr. Martin.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. This is a personal matter, just giving me the authority to execute documents related to it. Pretty straightforward.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board comment? Any public comment? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Now we move to the 2023 preliminary budget discussion. Mr. Martin.
Thank you again. I've got them all tonight, so this is good. Tonight is just an open budget discussion. As you recall, we did our preliminary budget at our last meeting. It was October 1st. So in terms of process, for those who are watching or here tonight, we did our preliminary budget presentation at our last meeting. Tonight, the board will have further discussion. The next item you'll see on the agenda is related. We'll talk about that when we get to that. Process-wise, at our next meeting in November 1st, we hope to adopt the preliminary budget as advertised if it's approved tonight. And then November 21st, we'll have further discussion and also move to advertise for final adoption of anything budget ordinance and any tax-related documents. So tonight is just an open forum for you and the public to have yet another discussion on the budget and any other questions. Thank you.
All right. Would anyone on the board like to comment about the budget? Anyone want to kick us off?
Sure, I'll do it. Madam Chair, thank you. I think I got approval there to do this. Let me take a 20,000-foot view here, maybe 50. The largest impacts on the budget, that's the $3,150,000 contribution to Berwyn Fire for its new fire station, or heavily renovated and new fire station at its Easttown location on Bridge Avenue. Secondly, the biggest impact, as I see it, has been inflation, increasing township operating expenses markedly. That being said, we have kept our tax increase well below the inflation index. We have worked hard on not doing certain things and cutting where we can. What we have not done is cut back on all of the great services that we provide our residents here in Tredyffrin Township and what we're known for. And I won't go down the list. We've got our public works, we have our community activities, obviously public safety with our police and fire and EMS, and other things that we do here in the township. We have not done anything to diminish those services. So it's been tough. We've made some tough decisions. We've had to do some difficult things in not moving ahead with certain things. But those are the steps we took because we wanted to preserve the best of what we have, and that's what we've done. Bottom line is, we're in a strong financial position. I said at our last meeting, I must have used the word strong and strength, at least 15 times. And that's what I believe. So going forward, we were prudent in how we developed our budget for 2023, and we're in a good position, and we're going to take care of business for 2023, and we are in a position tonight to move forward with a budget that will be well below the inflation index, and for that, I think we've done a pretty good job, and I'm happy with what I see in this budget. So, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else on the board have any comments about the budget?
Yes, Chairman Gassi. I've spoken with township staff and members of finance, and I was heartened to learn that there will be at least an inflation-adjusted increase to the fire companies of 8.5%. So that was great to see. I appreciate it, our ability to do that. That was one of the concerns I had that I brought up the prior BOS meeting. And then I'd like to reiterate again, I urge members of the board to review Chief Beatty's comments at the May 23rd BOS meeting during new matters, where he requested 2 police officers be added this year, primarily for traffic, for the traffic unit. And he said he would be okay with 1 this year. He went over the history of the staffing levels at Tredyffrin and cited call volume and staffing services, and that it was really a data-driven decision, in his words. And due to the population growth and calls, activity levels, that's where he was. So I know it's not currently in the preliminary budget. We still have time to add it. I know the numbers are not final, and there may be some adjustments going forward, but I want us to continue to look at that possibility going forward. Thank you.
I do want to clarify for fire EMS, the current preliminary budget that will be moving forward does not have any adjustment. That's something that we're currently discussing. Yeah, that's something that we're currently discussing with Easttown, and we're hopeful that we can kind of bump it up so that we have that 8.5 or some going more with inflation for the operating increase. So that's something that we'll be kind of discussing in our fire group and hopefully finalizing for the final budget, but not for the preliminary budget. So that's just a clarification. Any other board comments?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would say is that I think a lot of very hard work has gone into the budget. I mean, it would be nice to be able to have no increase like we had last year, but unfortunately that's just not the real world. I mean, it's not just the $3 million that goes to the fire company for their new station rebuild. I mean, it's fuel, it's salt, it's wages, it's, you just get on the list and every single one of our cost items is going up. And unfortunately, just like we're all paying more when we go to the stores as residents, the township has the same problem. And the only way we can get the money is to pass on a tax increase. So I can just assure everybody out there who's listening that we are working very hard to try to limit the increase as much as we possibly can. And I appreciate Bill and well, Joe's not here, Joe and the township staff and the hard work they're doing. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any other board comment? All right, why don't we move on to public comments? Mr. Uberg.
We'll see. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Heberg. For those who are listening from home, they may or may not know that I served on the Board of Supervisors from 2011 to 2016, beginning of 2016. So I also was on the Finance Committee for 4 years, so I have a pretty good idea, and worked with both Joe, Bill, Steve, Darren, worked with all of them in crafting the budget for 4 years on a pretty intensive basis. First of all, I'll make a specific comment relative to a discussion item from the meeting that you all held a couple of weeks ago, and that is about single hauler service. I think it's a very good idea, but I would absolutely avoid the township billing and collecting for that service. I do not think you want to take that on. I do not think you want to bill and collect residents for collection, because then the ownership of the service becomes the township's responsibility, even though you're not delivering the service. So people will call the township and say, hey, I'm on Main Street, and they didn't pick up my recycling today. Can you send somebody over? Well, they're not your trucks. They're not the people who are going to be going out there doing it. So I would be certain that a condition of the contract when you go out to request bids includes that the provider will not only do the collection of all of the refuse, the recycling, and the trash, but they'll also bill and collect from the customers. That seems to make sense, and I know other local municipalities do the same thing. The staffs, did an excellent job of laying out the information. I know a ton of time goes into this, and I appreciate the fact that you all recognize that, certainly, with your thanks to them. They're very thoughtful and thorough in the approach that they take. They want to provide quality services, and they also want to deliver value. And they want to do projects that can be done somewhere close to on time and on budget. They spend a lot of time trying to find funding sources. So, kudos to the staff for the work that they do that goes into this process. But at the end of the day, this is the board's budget. This is the budget that you adopt based on your decisions, not the staff's. So you basically guide them as to what you want to deliver to the township residents and people who live and work here. And it's so this is your budget. It's not their budget. I don't want anyone to infer by my comments that I don't understand the dynamic that's there. I think the headline from the budget, and I'm really going to focus on the revenue side. The expense side is, there are literally hundreds of pages of expense items, and I think there's a lot of detail there, and there's a lot of room for hours of questioning, which I went through when we crafted these budgets. But what I really want to focus on is the revenue side, because the one thing that I try to remember when I served was every penny we spend is taxpayer money. It's not my money. It's not your money. The money doesn't fall from the sky. It really comes from taxpayers. And so Mr. Miller asked an interesting question earlier about the use of time and the costs associated with the restroom at the Ladd Park. What I would keep in mind when I was looking at this budget was every $95,000 we spend, if we spend another $95,000, that's a 1% tax increase on everybody who lives here. So if you say, we want to hire somebody to give golf lessons at Wilson Farm Park and it's $95,000, that means everybody has to pay a 1% tax increase. And so I think that might help focus the attention. I think the headline number is going to be a 5.75% tax increase. I went back to 2003. It's the largest tax increase in at least the last 20 years in the township. So, people will focus on that. But what I'm focused on is the large use of general fund reserves. There's been some conversations at meetings over the past couple of years about the reserve policy. What was intended to do, how it's established, what the mechanics of it are. And in fact, the reserve policy was put together in 2014 or 15. Bill, Joe, myself, the Finance Committee sat in a room and basically came up with what we thought was a responsible, thoughtful, deliberate use of the reserves that the township had at the time. At the time, the township had reserves of $15, $16, $17 million. And while we knew that, that at times the township's general fund reserves might be needed to, and by the way, all that money is money that the township taxpayers gave us over the years that had been accumulated because it wasn't spent. But it's the savings account. It's the savings account for the township and should be looked at that way. And our thought was that, that over time, those reserves could be used to buffer against larger tax increases. So we could use a little bit of that along with, at times, tax increases, but it was a way to reduce the amount of ongoing tax increases that we might have to take in any one year. The policy was established that we would use no more, we would use no more than 5% of the township's budget would be filled by reserves. So, using simple math, if it was a $20 million budget, we would use no more than $1 million worth of reserves in any given year. And therefore, it would draw down very slowly. At the time, with the reserves, if we were at 15 million and we were going to go to 7 or 8 million potentially, it would take years for us to draw that down. But that was the original intention. There's been, the number that's been used in some meetings is, well, the idea was that the reserves would only ever be 30 or 35% of the annual operating spend. And that's not really what it was. We had conversations with the bond council, for example, for the township. So the bond advisors for the township said, we asked the question, okay, the township has a AAA bond rating. AAA bond rating is not only, a point of pride and a demonstration of the township's financial strength, but it also saves the township real money because we can borrow money at lower rates of interest if we have a AAA rating as opposed to something less than that. So the idea was, at what point do we get into a situation where the township's AAA bond rating might be at risk or might be reconsidered by the bond rating agencies? And the thought at that time was, we want to stay somewhere in the 30 to 35% range. There's no exact science to this, but essentially that was the thinking, was we could draw the reserves down, but once we got to that level, it might trigger a caution flag, and the township's AAA bond rating could be at risk. So that was the reserve policy that was established. At that time, the idea was if the board wanted to exceed the 5%, using 5% of the annual budget from reserves, there'd have to be an explicit discussion and vote on that particular specific matter. So this budget uses, by my calculation, $5.8 million of general fund reserves. $5.8 million. According to Mr. Duraco at the last meeting, the township has about $14.8 million. So in this budget, the township's general fund reserves, if these numbers are hit, would go from $14.8 million to $9 million. I mean, I don't know if anybody, you're welcome to disagree with me, but I'm just looking at the arithmetic. That's a pretty stunning use of the township's savings account. Those numbers are the type of thing which could raise the caution with the rating agencies. To see a township that all of a sudden basically is using, over 20% of its budget is being used from the savings account. That's basically where we are. And so I got to say that concerns me greatly because, this is a pattern that's hard to get out of once you start. Once you start using the savings account for stuff, that's a problem. The question was asked of Mr. Duraco and Mr. Martin, what are the risks to this budget in 2023? And their answer, which I think was spot on, was transfer tax revenue that's in the budget and building permit revenue, which is in the budget, at a total of about $5.7 million are very economically sensitive. So interest rates on mortgages, 30-year mortgages, have gone from 3% to 7%. I think it's safe to assume that there won't be as many houses that'll sell in 2023 as did in 2021 or 2022. I can also tell you, I think it's safe to say that there won't be as many commercial buildings that will sell with this level of interest rates as sold in the past several years. The township has been very fortunate that transfer tax and building permit revenue have been very healthy for the last 5 or 6 years, but it won't always be like that. I can tell you that I went back and looked at some numbers that I had from 2011 through 2015. Transfer taxes and building permit revenues together were between $3 and $4 million. And the budget this year is 5.7. So let's say that you have let's say that instead of 5.7, it's 3.7 million in 2023. That's another $2 million shortfall. Where's that money going to come from? The savings account. So, this is you're kind of on the nice edge here with this budget. I think of it in terms of a family, right? So let's say that you have a family budget and you make $100,000 a year, and you say, well, probably going to get a 6% raise this year, so I got $106,000, and basically what you're saying is, the rest of the, but you say, well, we're going to spend like $150,000. So we'll take, $45,000, $50,000 from the savings account. That can't last very long. It certainly can't last forever unless you have a huge savings account. And the township's resources in the general fund reserves are limited. If you had a year where you did, I'm just looking at the numbers that are on this sheet of paper. You're going to go from $14.8 million to $9 million in reserves according to this budget. If you fall short on the revenue side, you could be at $8 million or $7 million this time next year, or at the end of 2023. That's where we are. So, and then I look forward in 2024. We don't have an operating budget for 2024 at this point, but according to the capital plan that's in this budget, in 2024, we'll use, $2.4 million of general fund reserves in 2024. That's what the plan is. Along with, and so what's going to happen is, on the operating side, you're going to use a bunch of the savings account for the capital plan that you have. So on the operating side, you may use some reserves, but you're also you're stacking up to have a large tax increase in 2024 as well. Plus in 2024, there's going to be a new stormwater fee that's going to be a couple $100 per resident, which is effectively a 30 or 35% tax increase on people. So the net of it is, we're at a point where these increases, you're basically saying to the taxpayers, we're going to increase your taxes, substantially this year. We're going to raise the savings account. Next year, we're likely going to have a significant tax increase, use more of the reserves, and a stormwater fee. So, the financial challenge here is substantial, and I think you really have got to look at the expense side. You've got to look at the operating expenses. You got to look at the capital projects. I think you got to reset, and you've got to look at all these things that we have planned. All this. We've got, $15 million or some number like that of capital projects planned every year as far as the eye can see. The staff, Darren, Steve, Bill, Joe, they're running they're maintaining all these roads, maintaining all these parks. The police department is doing, is protecting the community. I mean, they're providing all these services. And then on top of that, you're saying, we want you to go out and do $15 million worth of new projects. We have, 6 or 8 or 10 additional projects beyond the day-to-day that we want you to do. And I think that, you can't possibly do all that. They can't possibly do all that and do it as well as they want it, and you want it, and the community wants it. I think that you need to sort of look at the priorities, to go through there and take a realistic look at what you can do, what you can deliver well. And there used to be binders. I'm sure it's all online now. But, the binders were several hundred pages. And in there's a ton of information. And I think you've got to look at every line and say, does this stay or does this go? Is this a top priority, or is this something that we just don't have the bandwidth to get done? We can't afford it. And I think that there's, to pass ultimately this, I think is dangerous. I think to pass a budget where you're using a huge amount of reserves with a large tax increase and big spending as far as the eye can see, it really concerns me. So I appreciate you listening to my thoughts. I might be back between now and when you pass in 6 weeks or so, but thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more public comments?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board and the public. I just want to take a couple of minutes just to talk about some high-level topics that affect all 3 fire companies that service Tredyffrin Township, Radnor, Berwyn, and Paoli fire companies. As many of you know, in our ESOP group discussions that we have with Easttown Township, we've talked about a lot of these issues, but I think it's just important to get some of these things out on the table because they not just affect what we're doing in next year's budget, really as we look at the next 3 to 5 year time frame. These are critical topics that we're going to have to tackle together as a group. First thing is affecting many industries right now, ensuring that we have a competitive wage scale for our full-time, part-time staffs at all 3 fire companies. That's a common theme that's been shared across multiple industries, especially as we come out of the pandemic. That's something that we've shared a lot of information on, especially with the salary survey that was completed. So that's something we want to make sure is front and center and that we continue to talk about in our discussions. Second item, development. That has been a big topic for a number of years that we've talked about. Right now, we have the apartment building that's finally getting constructed at Contention Lane and Sweetser Road. It is a huge building. We look at the previous use of that property, a commercial use with limited time frame. We're now building a multi-story residential building with a major parking garage. It'll be 24/7 operation. So you'll see increased impacts on fire, EMS, and police, which is normal. That's what happens when we see that new development coming in. New development is positive. It means we have a thriving community. We're increasing the tax base, but ultimately there's an impact on services, especially as it relates to public safety. Right now, as we've talked about, Brightview Senior Living example at 301 East Conestoga Road, that facility is a major impact to Berwyn Fire Company. We are going there regularly. What started as a slow drip from the faucet, it's running at a pretty steady stream now that we're responding down to Brightview for a myriad of medical responses. We do get some fire responses there, typically of elevator malfunctions, fire alarm that burnt food, they have a mulch fire, some other emergency out in the parking lot, and our partners at the police department are responding to those calls as well. Echo Lake, I know Chief Tess has talked to you about this from Paoli Fire Company. That's another big generator for call volume. Those are Medicare patients that are getting responded to, so when Paoli Fire Company, for example, is responding to that facility, very much like when we go to Brightview, there's a fixed amount of money that we're legally allowed to bill for. We can't bill people $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 and expect we're going to get paid for it. It's not how it works. So we're limited in what we can collect when we deliver a critical service to the residents there in both of those buildings as an example. Final one I point out, and while this is not in Tredyffrin Township, it's worth noting, is Recovery Centers of America in Easttown Township. This is something that's being discussed as we speak right now in Easttown with the other leadership with Berwyn and Paoli. Recovery Centers of America, we are going there almost every day or every other day. Sometimes we go there 3 or 4 times in one day, we get a break for a couple days, and then we go back. Let me preface it, that facility is unfortunately something that we need. The opioid epidemic, your drug use, alcohol use, it's a major problem. The pandemic has amplified some of those issues, so they provide a critical service. The problems that we have with that facility is that most of the patients that are there are what are referred to as commercial medical payers. So we're going and delivering the service and we're billing for those services. Our typical collection rate for everyone who's residents here, including myself and Mr. Heberg, is about 70-80%. So when the fire companies are billing for emergency medical services, they're seeing about a 70-80% return. Our return to Recovery Centers of America is 20%. Berwyn Fire Company is seeing an over 6-figure loss in revenue year over year at this point with that facility. It is a major problem. When we're going there, it's taking away from really our critical missions being available for our core constituency, which are the residents of Tredyffrin and Easttown. So it affects our fire response, and it takes up a lot of time to deal with the responses there, especially if you're, unfortunately, at the front, which is a common occurrence. Someone wants to overdose one last time or get a last high, and they're literally out front. So you can't just scoop those folks up. There's a whole process that has to go on. Easttown police are typically there. It's not uncommon. Tredyffrin Township's down there trying to help control a scene. And then we need to get those folks to the hospital to get them stabilized and then get them back to RCA for treatment. So again, we can talk more about it offline, but I just wanted to get it out there that while, again, that is a needed facility, it is a major impact on us in Easttown, but it obviously affects what we do in Tredyffrin as well. The other issue, from an emergency medical services standpoint, you've heard a lot of things about the pressures that have occurred with reduced volunteerism, increased need for paid staff because of increased call volume. Right now, unfortunately, Malvern Fire Company is having major problems. They have days where they don't have a single ambulance on duty, which means Paley Fire Company is being the next closest provider, is getting unusually pulled to areas in Willistown and further to the west that they typically haven't been over the last several years. So that's putting direct pressure on Paley Fire Company to respond to those emergencies, and again, it's taking away from their core areas that they're responsible for. Now let me be clear, mutual aid is a normal thing. Just like the police department, they go to Upper Marion, they go to Radnor, we're doing the same types of things. You kind of have that regular mutual aid that goes on. This is what we refer to as unusual mutual aid, unusual demand. And unfortunately, that's only getting worse. So it's something else that we need to think about that's directly impacting Paley Fire Company. It's indirectly impacting Berwyn and Radnor because you get the domino effect as units start getting tied up. Volunteer turnout. Again, Radnor, Paley, Berwyn, we're no different than all the other volunteer fire companies in the United States. Volunteerism is down. We are not going back to the 1970s, despite what some folks in Pennsylvania might have you believe. I'm a proud volunteer, but I'm also a realist. We need to do things as a community to encourage folks to volunteer at their local fire companies, but we need to be cognizant at the same time. We need to ensure that we have paid staff in place and ready to respond when those volunteers are not available. That's going to be a big challenge moving forward. As Mr. Heberg talked about, yes, this budget has a lot of things going on, but just think about for a minute, if you don't have the volunteers you have in these 3 fire companies servicing Tredyffrin Township. This discussion is completely different, and quite honestly, it is going to be different at some point. The game is going to be right now is how do we keep those volunteers we have in place now to push that time frame out when that needs to happen. Talked about EMS billing a little bit. The last thing is talk about State Relief Association funds. This year we saw a little bit of an increase back up the hill, which is nice. Going back to 2013, we start to see either stagnant or declining state relief funding because the state was using different things with the police pension fund, with an electric tax credit program, or shifting money around, and relief money kind of got screwed up for a little bit, but it looks like we're moving back to more, like normal levels and more realistic things that we've seen in the past. And I lied, I got one more thing to say. In October of 2008, when both townships, Tredyffrin and Easttown, did a consultant study, recommendation 20, let me read it because I wrote it down. Recommendation 20 in that report, the facility operated by Berwyn Fire Company should be replaced in the very near future. It's 2022. That was 2008, so I really appreciate the fact that the staff and the Board of Supervisors here and also in Easttown have recognized the need and the necessity to finally get that project across the finish line. We're pretty close. Obviously, we've got some additional fundraising to do, but it took a lot of courage to do that, and I greatly appreciate it based on the time I've spent, but also the fact that I'm a resident here and it affects my family as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the budget? Looks like we have an online. Ms. Clark.
Good evening. I'd like to thank Mike Heekberg for his diligence in going through the details. I've been trying to get through the first couple hundred pages and delving down into the numbers. And I have a lot of detailed questions, but I will off-site ask those of Mr. DeRocco. I also want to thank Eamon for speaking up on Brazuna speaking up on behalf of the fire departments and explaining that. I do think, and this is not, I'm not questioning it, I know there's great value in our fire departments, but I think a $3.1 million expenditure on top of the $1.8 million we just spent on land, where part of the fire department will have a location that will probably have to be built out to serve their needs. To do this, those are huge numbers we're talking about. And because of their size, I think it warrants a real discussion open to the public in detail. How did you land on the $3.1 million? Is that going to cover the entire building? Will there be other requirements going forward in terms of the next fire trucks that will be needed, et cetera? I understand that we had started years ago a group of supervisors with staff and the 3 fire departments looking at their operations, trying to find best practices to share for economies, maybe even looking for some economies of scale if we shared some resources, et cetera. I know there's a lot of cooperation between the fire departments, but I thought by now we would have gotten some clear feedback in terms of how do we fund our fire departments. And I haven't heard where we are on that. I'm a strong proponent of thinking through a fire fee for our residents and for the facilities where there seems to be high demand and repeat needs for our emergency services going out to. And so I have a lot of questions about how this number was arrived at, what it means for everyone else. Paoli had their fire department building updated quite a few years ago. How was that handled? Was that a capital fundraising project? Did the township give significant funds for that? I know when we had the library built years ago, there was a huge capital campaign fund raising effort that went on to build that building. Maybe we need something like that. I know I donate to my fire department on a regular basis, but when I hear at the various meetings, the fire departments, they say only 30% or maybe 27 to 30% of the residents and commercial facilities, retail facilities, are contributing. And I can say, well, I'm glad I pay my taxes, so I cover it there, and I pay the fee, and I look, one of my neighbors to the left and one of my neighbors to the right obviously aren't paying if there's only 30-some people who are donating. But I honestly don't know if I'm donating the right amount. I know a lot of people have been very, very generous. I don't know if I'm being skimpy in my donations, but I really think there should be a fire fee going around that allocates the charges as in as fair a way as possible. But so I was expecting to hear some things from the folks who are working with the fire departments of, hey, here are our learnings. Here's ways that we've found some efficiencies that the fire departments are, taking care of. And this is how they're working together. And here's where there's real shortfalls in funding. And here are the various ways of doing it. Maybe one fire department has a better campaign for getting funds. Maybe, the holiday sales, the various fundraising things, some are really good. Some people have some fire departments have a better maybe return from the residents and commercial facilities that they service. But I've heard nothing. And then to have this $3.1 million come up without a lot of explanation or detail, or how does this fit in with how we pay and support the capital needs of the other fire departments. I think we need a clear, open discussion, sharing of information so that we know we're being fair with our fire departments, we're being equitable, and we're also being fair among our residents and corporate members in the township. So any comments on that, I'd appreciate.
So I can answer, make a couple of comments based on that. First, about the 3.15 million, we actually voted on that about a year ago, so that's something that we had multiple discussions on as a board. It was a joint resolution with Easttown Township, and it required a lot of work with our fire company, with Berwyn Fire Company, to get to that number. Essentially, the 3.15 million plus the rest from Easttown Township was a commitment for 50% of the project. And because of that commitment, Berwyn Fire Company was able to apply for and receive a state RACP grant. I think $2 million. And the rest is on Berwyn Fire for fundraising, and they have kicked off that campaign to get the rest of that way. So please encourage everyone you know to contribute to that fundraising campaign. So that 3.15 million was discussed at a couple of board meetings publicly. It required a lot of work to get to that number. And then regarding the operating questions you had, you basically hit the nail on the head. That is our goal for this year. Our fire ESOP group with Easttown Township, we are kicking off that process to basically analyze those big questions of how we are going to pay for our fire and EMS going forward, what that model will look like, and whether we're validating the model we use or finding new ways to create efficiency. That's basically our charge for the year. So you'll be hearing more about that effort, but that is absolutely a major goal of our group this year, now that we've made such big headway on our infrastructure projects for fire EMS. So hopefully that helped answer some of those questions. Mr. Clark.
Hello. Thanks to everybody for all the comments. Mr. Heberg, as always, was especially insightful on kind of the big themes going on here. First of all, can I delve just a minute into the Stormwater Fund? I see that we have 7 FTEs allocated into the Stormwater Fund, $700,000 of salaries, wages, and benefits. There's another 300 grand of allocations from some other department somewhere. And repairs is $200,000 of the 1.2 million. So I'm just wondering what residents are actually seeing in terms of direct benefit from our Stormwater Fund. So could we just start with that and kind of explain what you've put in there and what's going on?
Sure, salary and benefits, that's the new staffing for the team. They'll be working on the stormwater repairs, cleaning the inlets, the MS4 requirements. Steve can give you more detail on that. The $200,000 is just what we do, maintenance repair of pipes during the year that are unbudgeted in terms of capital projects. They will do basically cleaning and repair and replacement of pipes that we can do with our internal staff without having to do a large capital project. I mean, that's the short and nitty gritty. And Steve, if you want to comment in more detail what the staff will be doing, but that's the general operating at this point. Again, that's programmed for beginning once we have the stormwater fee in process as we move forward.
And will there be a reimbursement back once the fee is
Well,
implemented?
to get started, we're using the general fund's loaning the money to get started. Once the fee is collected, that will.
But that's important. It's loaning the money. Eventually, that $1 million outlay is going to come back into the general fund.
Yep.
So those 7 folks are currently like public works employees doing, street sweeping and that kind of thing, or are these new employees or?
Mixture. I'd have to talk to Joe. Joe, unfortunately, is not here tonight. He's ill, so I can give you the detail on how it's allocated, but I don't have it with me in front of me, but there's some that are being program from our existing staff as well as adding new staff.
Right. I mean, you can see a little bit of anxiety here is that this stormwater fund and Mr. Heberg's, guesstimate of $200 per person, which is a pretty per household, pretty substantial tax increase equivalent to people. There's not going to be much left over the way we're going for kind of the flood reduction activities or paying interest on capital used for flood reduction activities. I'm just a little nervous. It's all the stormwater fee is going to get sucked up by routine day-to-day maintenance, and people aren't going to see the real benefits that they're looking for here. And I would just ask you to be really careful about that.
Well, I would just be careful also. We're early in the process of determining how much will be collected from the stormwater fee. We don't know the amounts yet, so we're still working with that process will be working out with our consultant over the next 12 months. And Steve, you want to comment? We're not sure exactly where the number of total revenue collected will be yet, so it's a ballpark, but we know there are minimum expenses we'll have to do to operate it. That's what's programmed there right now, as well as the capital items we're proposing. But we'll know more as we move through that process.
Yeah. I mean, certainly the whole idea was that this was kind of a three-legged thing that, Steve has, given us a very good model of, the three aspects, the regulatory, the infrastructure, and the flood reduction. I'm worried that stool is going to have one very short leg. So enough said on that, though. Craig, it seems to me that like half of our budget, if we could go back to the general fund now, is salaries, wages, and benefits. And the township has good long-term contracts, wage contracts that constrain wage increases in the 4% range, maybe. So thinking that inflation is a major driver here of expense increase and therefore tax increase is not necessarily the right way to be thinking about it, and that we should be more worried about the thing that Mr. Heberg mentioned, which is the budgeted decrease in transfer tax and permit fee, which may even not be enough. And do we have any comments on that?
Sure, I could. In terms of, if you look back at our budget presentation, there are drivers for inflation. You did mention the contracts. Those are contractual, except for the small non-union group. But our property and casual went up $110,000. Salt budget was up $30,000 from prior year. Everything we have in purchasing has a fuel surcharge on it, so those are driving our overall operating costs as well. And overall in terms of other revenues, so it's actually a pretty good budget. I think we have looked at reducing the overall building permit numbers as well as bringing down the estimated real estate transfer tax. But again, those are all subject to the economy. We won't know what those are. You're correct. So there is always that risk there, but I think that's why we balanced what we thought was a reasonable tax increase with reducing some of that. We also did reduce the use of general fund reserves for the operating budget by $279,000 as well.
Right. But I guess one thing that residents shouldn't lose sight of is there's basically $1.5 million reduction in those two revenue items, which clearly leaves a gap. If we assume that this year we're roughly in balance, income and revenues, somehow we got to find that $1.5 million and any of these inflationary increases or other changes. So, okay, that was really all my commentary for now. I mean, just to emphasize Mr. Heberg's point, I think that we should generally be worried looking forward about, how the year might pan out here, and I think be ready to, avoid too big a hit to our fund balance and general reserves. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment about the budget, preliminary budget? Ms. Clark again?
Hi there. Sorry to take your time, but I realized that I had failed to thank all the township staff and everyone else who have been working on the budget, because I know a lot of hard hours go into that. And I would say I think you did a pretty good job in terms of most of the general fund revenue and expense items in trying to keep a control on a number of things. Obviously, like insurance, property and liability is just outrageous, and there's nothing we can do about that I'm aware of. So I think you were trying to keep all the expenditures down as much as possible. I'm not talking about any of the contributions, but all the managed operating sort of things I think you were taking control of. And I felt that your revenue estimates in terms of the real estate transfer taxes and building permits was cautious, but not overly cautious. And yes, we have a bit of a risk, but it's not as high a risk if we hadn't put some sort of increased taxes on the populace, as well as keeping those expected revenues at a reasonable rate, that is from the real estate transfer taxes, et cetera. I do have a question. Oh, and also I want to say thanks for refreshing my memory. I have faulty memory on the 3.1 for the fire department, and bravo to the actions of having Easttown involved and then getting the state grants. Excellent work, because grant writing is not always easy. So well done. I'm sure years ago, as I was hearing about the offer that we would be putting money against this, that at that time I thought we were going to have, would have been further along in terms of coming up with funding mechanisms for these big things we saw coming down the pike. I'll anxiously look forward to updates on what the organization is, or the informal group has come up with, and if we will be having any quote unquote fire tax, fire fees, or other sorts of funding for all the future needs of our fire departments. I do then also have a question, if I can switch to the detail a little bit. And could I get a explanation on the contributions that are on the general funds expenditure page, the contributions in the budget for 23? We have a 4.678 million contributions, and I think some of the fire department might be in there, but could someone detail that, or should I wait till Joe's back and feeling better?
Yeah, mostly it is the fire department contributions. I'd have to get the detail. Joe and I can certainly follow up with you on detail on that.
Okay, thanks. And also, I don't know if you can still hear me, the interdepartmental allocation, the $300,000 figure there. Who's paying whom on this?
I'm not sure which item you're referring to.
Oh, it's on the general fund expenditures, close to the bottom of one of the pages. It's the 93,000 line item. Before you get to total operating expenditures, there's an allocation that's interdepartmental, and it's sort of a credit to the general fund expenditures of $300,000 in our budget.
Again, I'll have to check with Joe on the detail now.
That's fine.
Sure, if you give me the account number, I can find it for you, but we'll follow up.
Okay, I had a couple of those. I just like sort of the detail to understand it, and also trying to understand how the stormwater fund expenditures merge into the overall budget, and where they're getting their operating revenue from and the total capital revenue from. They both say transfer from general.
Correct. That's coming from the general fund through reserves.
Okay.
It will be paid back once the stormwater fee is implemented.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
I can just answer the first question you had there on the contributions. The reason it's so high, the 4.68, is just because it includes the 3.15. And so that's important to note that that's just a one-time contribution. So that's why it's so much bigger than the previous year. So it includes our regular contributions, which also went up a little bit this year. But the major chunk of that is that 3.15 for the Bridge Avenue project.
Okay, and that 1.58 differential there, that's going to the fire departments?
Most of that, yes. There are some other things in there, but I'll get you the detail on that. The fire department is the vast majority of that balance.
Of the remaining 1.58 that we don't have detail on there.
Correct.
Thanks so much.
Any other public comment? All right. Well, I will close unless we have any other final thoughts from the board members. I will close.
Yeah, I have one thought, just to drive. First of all, I think, Mike, I appreciate your comments, and we'll take a look at the project list, because I think it is long. I think last time we talked about it, and some of the further out projects are more speculative as opposed to, like, we're actually really doing them, just to be clear, but we'll take a look at that. I think that's worth spending some time on, so thank you for your comments. One other point I want to address, which I've heard, and I think, Carol, you mentioned it, but I hear it from other residents a lot, which is, why don't the fire companies just fundraise? Like, there's only one set of residents. There's 29,000 people in the township. You're going to fundraise from the same people. All of us benefit from the fire company. So to ask the volunteers to spend time, effort, and money, because it's not free for those mailings, to fundraise from the residents, hoping that some of us contribute, which I do contribute, by the way, and I hope everyone here does, is a sense of fairness and effort, and it seems like it's something we should just be, all of us contributing a little bit, because we all benefit from what is a very, very important service. So, it's easy to say, guys, just go fundraise for it, but it's really hard for them to do that, and it's in some sense unfair to ask some subset of the residents to pay for what everyone benefits from. So anyway, just that's my own 2 cents on that. But thanks.
Thanks. Supervisor Holt?
Yes. With respect, Mr. Hebert, I just disagree completely with your assessment. And looking at the reserves and what's happening this year, there's a one-time contribution much needed to public safety for the $3.1 million. There's going to be the $1 million outlay, which is basically a loan that's going to come back from the stormwater fee. We're reducing our use of reserves in the 2023 budget by almost 25%. The 5.75% proposed tax increase is not substantial in my opinion, particularly considering that we did not have a tax increase last year. What I think is potentially dangerous is the underinvestment in our township. So what I do agree with you on, though, is the long-term funding sources and needs in the township, and that we do have some significant capital needs coming up in the medium to long term, and we're going to have to take a long, hard look at what we're going to need to do to find revenue for that, and it is not cutting expenses at the township. I've been through, the staff has been through these hundreds of pages, and there is nothing to cut, in my opinion. We've done a good, hard job of that. We operate at great efficiencies. The township residents receive incredible value for their average tax bill of $620. So there it is.
Yeah, I'd just like to add a couple comments, which is, so I'll start out by saying that I've not gone through the budget in detail to the same extent that Mr. Hebert and Supervisor Holt and others have. But when I look at projects that we have, there's a couple of things that I look at. One is, what are we spending the money on? And if you don't spend the money, and this is kind of saying what Supervisor Holt said in slightly different terms, which is that there comes a time to pay the piper. And this has to do with things like stormwater, where if you go decades of neglect. And at the time, I'm not blaming the people that did things the way they did them, because they thought they were doing things the right way at the time. But, history has a wonderful way of, having 20/20 vision that people don't necessarily have looking forward. But there is a time to pay the piper, and things like stormwater, we have to deal with, because it's very hard to look someone in the eye when they've been flooded out of their home and say, well, sorry, you just have to put up with this. And to me, talking to people like that has been one of the harder things that I've done as a supervisor, is talking to people like that and kind of understanding what they've gone through. The other thing is that, so this kind of goes to the need for services. And one of the things I look at is, are we providing services that are needed in the most cost-efficient manner? And if we're doing things in a cost-efficient way, then clearly, we need to do that. And that kind of leads into something that both Supervisor Miller and Supervisor Holt have said, which is that the efficiency then comes down to fairness. If you do things unfairly, you're not being efficient. So I think that we do have a need to look at, are we funding our services fairly and appropriately? And these are things that I'm going to be looking at, and I'm certainly going to be, asking questions of the Finance Committee and looking at things in the budget, though I certainly do not expect to be going through the budget to the same level of detail as Mr. Duraco or the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Any other board discussion? All right, we will end this discussion and move on to a related item, which is the motion to authorize staff to advertise a public hearing on November 1st, 2022 to consider and possibly adopt the 2023 preliminary budget. Mr. Martin.
Thank you again. As just mentioned as we kicked off this discussion tonight, this is a requirement under our charter to advertise a public hearing and possibly consider adoption of the 2023 preliminary budget, which will keep us moving in our budget process through the end of the year. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion? Any public comment? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Now we will move on to escrows, and we have a motion to approve Release 2 for Sweetsford Plaza in the amount of $409,371.42, balance remaining $105,799.13. Mr. Virgo, I always have a hard time with that.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I know this is where you would wish they were all around, you had no sense in change for these big items. This is for the Echo development that's at Sweetsford and Contention Lane. It includes site improvements that have been done so far, some temporary grading, earthwork, fill, excavation, and some other site improvements that have been completed. They have been inspected by staff and or our consultants at Princeton Hydro, and we are recommending release in the amount of $409,371.42 tonight.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Any board comments? Any public comment? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. We move on to new matters. Do we have any board member new matters tonight?
Well, I just want to jump in quickly because you were talking about the community day. So one thing that I'm not sure who to thank, but we certainly had beautiful weather, and if the staff can basically arrange for that weather every year, I'd be really happy.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment tonight, public new matters tonight? All right, hearing none. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, that concludes our meeting. Thanks, everyone.